Okay, hi everyone. Here we are, Friday, at the end of week 2, and you should feel really, really good about the work that you did in those first couple weeks. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed reading what's up so far for your makes in terms of your poems. You have such great, great, you worked with those mentor texts really well and also just have some really amazing stories. So those have been a blast to read as they're coming in over the last few days, and I know more will come in by tonight. You're also going to notice that in that Make area in our G Plus community, Peter Kittle's class has joined us, and he will ask his students to also comment and think about the work that we're doing together. So you'll have a ton of different ideas to work from. One of the things that we'll end with every 2 weeks that not all of you know about yet is that I have asked 5 students to be kind of the featured curators at the end of each make cycle. And so coming up this next week, some of you will get individual emails from me asking you to be the curators for this next set of cycles, the next 2 weeks. But I'm excited to have those 5 students kind of reflect on what we've done for the last 2 weeks and highlight some of your really good work. So we'll be watching for that after Labor Day weekend, and they'll be writing about the work we've done. Okay, so coming up, now we're about to move into Make Cycle 2. And Make Cycle 2 is all focused on storytelling. So I'm hoping we kind of build on the stories maybe that you started to tell in these last couple of weeks and think about really carefully, how do we help students generate ideas for their writing? And in our case, how do we generate ideas for our own writing? So as we move through these make cycles, so the next 2 weeks is going to be storytelling, and then we're going to move into 2 weeks where we focus really carefully on expository writing, then argumentative writing, and then moving into multimodal writing and some reflection. And if you wanted to, you could take an idea and write about it throughout all these makes and kind of see how an idea gets turned into kind of these different forms and different genres. So that'd be one way you could do it. Or you could get bored with an idea and then just write about kind of a new idea each time. So we are going to try to help each other generate ideas for what to write about. So we're going to end this 2 weeks with telling stories. So this first week coming up after Labor Day weekend is we're going to jump into our book. Where's my book? About the authors. So please, 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 I'm begging you to check your email. Yesterday I sent just a quick link, yes or no, and it says, do you have the book? Yes or no? And a little over half of you have responded to that, but it makes me nervous. Like, I want you to check your email every day when you're in an online class. So check your email and tell me that you have the book so that I can problem solve if you don't yet. But I'm hoping you have this book by Wednesday. So we're going to read the first chapter of this book, which is about Writer's Workshop. And then in the back, they have a whole bunch of appendices that are kind of almost lesson plan like, or ways to generate ideas. So I'm going to have you read the A and B units, which are all about how we support students in coming up with ideas for what to write about. So that's going to be next week, and you'll have a prompt about that, kind of what your takeaway is. And I'm also going to ask you to notice really carefully, there's tons of student writing, little kid writing in this book, like this. That's kind of adorable. This is Josh's story about mammoths, and he's in first grade. And so I'm going to ask you to pay attention to the kids' writing. And for those of you who haven't been around little kids and their writing, it'll be interesting for you to hear from you, like what surprises you about what they're capable or not capable of doing. And so I'm going to ask you to notice that as part of the prompt. The other thing we're going to end with by the end of this first week of the second cycle is there's a Google slide link to a bunch of prompts that will help you generate different lists about ideas for what you might write about. So you're going to find these Google slides, and I'm hoping that you'll take like 2 minutes, maybe even set a timer, and it'll ask you things like, what are your hopes and fears? And just write for a couple minutes, like a list. What would you take on a deserted island? And write a list. And I'm hoping as you move through those series of prompts, which came from Peter Kittle, thank you very much, that maybe you'll end with all these lists of ideas of things you could write about, things you could tell stories about. I'm also going to ask you to watch one of my favorite TED Talks by Mac Barnett. One of the books we're going to work with is Battle Bunny, which is awesome. And Mac Barnett, here if I can turn this right, is one of the authors of this book. And his TED Talk is just lovely. So I'm going to ask you to watch his TED Talk, which is also about why we tell stories and what they do for us and little kids. So I'm going to ask you to kind of just like, what was interesting to you about that? How might you think about that as a future teacher? So that's week 1, about the authors, Matt Barnett, TED Talk, and a couple of prompts related to that, including some brainstorming of these lists. When you go to share your list, I'm just asking you to share like 1 or 2 of your list. And you could even just, here's a piece of paper. You could have your list and you could just take a photo of that and upload that for your list prompt. That would be totally fine. Week 2, as always, in a cycle, we're going to the second week of that. So really week 4 for us, but the second week of the cycle. We're always going to be moving toward our makes. And this time you're going to write stories, which from your poems, you should be able to do this because you already did some cool work. So once again, mentor texts that you're going to use hopefully as inspiration for what you might write a story about. And this time the mentor texts are some of my favorites. So this is The Dot by Peter Reynolds, and The Dot is about a little girl named Vashti who doesn't think she can do art, and her teacher helps her see that she can. It's also International Dot Day on September 15th, and I'm hoping we participate. I'll put a link on our site. I'm also having you read, and I bet a lot of you know, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, even in Australia, which is one of my favorite books. So I'm hoping that this is also inspiration, like how could you write a story about your fears or your frustrations? And then finally, a book you might not be as familiar with. It's by Chris Van Allsburg, and it's called The Mysteries of Harris Burdick. And what it is this really kind of cool and creepy bunch of images that always have, here I have to put on my glasses so I can see. So like here I'm going to show you one that we're actually going to work with, which is, I think, here we go. So bunch of images, there. And all it says is this image is called Mr. Linden's Library, and it says he had warned her about the book. Now it was too late. And these images, and there's a bunch from this book. This one says, A Strange Day in July. He threw with all his might, but the third stone came skipping back. These images can be used with little kids they can write their own stories around those images. So that's exactly what I've linked to, is a story from a 4th grader named Ashley who wrote about that Mr. Linden's Library, and she has a story called Moving Vines. And so I also want you to see what a little bit older kids are capable of doing with those kinds of examples. So those are your mentor texts, The Dot, Alexander and the Horrible, Terrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, and the Mysteries of Harris Burdick. Those are your, and Ashley's story, Moving Vines, little girl story, the 4th grader who wrote about that. And so similar to what we did last week, you're going to use those to say, what was interesting to you? What did you notice about repetition? What did you notice about the way these stories were written that you could find inspiring for your own stories? So I'm going to have you write about that in the mentor text, and we'll end on Friday, September 15th with your own story. Lots of possibilities for this. You could use the Little Bird Tales site if you didn't use it this last time, or even if you did, you could use it again. You could create a Google slide deck where you have some images and text that tell your story. You could draw or write your story and take pictures of that. You could do this, record yourself reading your story and provide a video link for us. Really a lot of ways that you could do it. Even in a Google Doc, you could write your story. And I'm hoping you put some images in this story too, because little kids always have images in their stories. And if you have another way that you can think of sharing it, then let me know. I'd be happy to, whatever. If you have some cool digital tool that you're like, you know what I like to use, please feel free. I put a note on that assignment about length. I'm not really worried about the length of your stories because it's really going to depend on how many drawings you have versus how much text you have, whether you read your stories. So don't stress about that. Just think about how you generate a story and what the components are. And hopefully, all these lists will help you come up with ideas. I will respond to those posts and try to help you think through what to write about, and hopefully, you'll do that for each other. You've been doing a really good job with that, I have to say. So I'm hoping you keep that up, that you keep saying smart things to the other people in our class, because that's been really awesome to see. I think that's it for this week's little. So here we go with week one, where you're getting into our book. We're going to read the whole thing about the authors, and where you're just starting to generate some lists and ideas. I think you'll love Mac Barnett's TED Talk. He's so charming. Okay, hope you have a great Labor Day weekend, and if you live around here, oh my God, don't go outside. It's so hot and so bad. I'm going to try to just, well, I'm going to be on the computer responding to your stuff, so I'm going to do that from inside. And oh, and I'm in my office this week, so here you go. I just hung some really cool lights that I'm kind of happy with. So I've got, here you go. You get a glimpse. I'm a big Walking Dead fan, so there's my poster. And there you go. There's your view of the office. Cool. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to reading your stuff.